Rain. Relentless rain. The kind that turns streets into rivers and rivers into killers. But at exactly 3:47 a.m. on July 29, 2025, the 69 elderly residents of Taishitun Town Elderly Care Center in Beijing's Miyun district were about to learn that sometimes the safest places become the most dangerous. Water doesn't knock. It doesn't wait. It just takes. In less than 6 hours, what started as heavy rainfall became Beijing's deadliest flood disaster in over 2 decades. This is about how a year's worth of rain falling in just 4 days exposed the fatal flaws in a city of 22 million people, and why the deadliest floods in Beijing's modern history were both completely predictable and entirely preventable. Welcome to Earth's Dark Secrets. What I'm about to show you will change how you think about urban flood management forever. While the world was watching Typhoon Koumei devastate Shanghai and Zhejiang province, a different meteorological nightmare was brewing 1,200 kilometers inland. Beijing wasn't supposed to get hit this hard. The city sits in a natural basin, protected by the Yanshan Mountains to the north and the Taihang Mountains to the west. For centuries, this geographic shield deflected the worst of China's extreme weather. But on July 28th, those same mountains became a death trap. As moisture-laden air masses collided with Beijing's mountainous terrain, they created what meteorologists call an orographic precipitation event. Essentially, the mountains forced every drop of water in the clouds to fall directly on the capital region. The numbers are unbelievable. Beijing received almost a year's worth of rain in just a handful of days. The real killer wasn't the total rainfall. It was the intensity. Peak rainfall rates exceeded 50 millimeters per hour in Miyun district, where the elderly care center was located. That means in 1 hour, residents watched enough water fall to fill a swimming pool in their backyard. Beijing authorities confirmed 44 deaths total, with 31 elderly people dying at the Taishitun Town Elderly Care Center in Miyun district. What the official reports don't tell you about that Monday morning is that the nursing home sat directly in the path of 3 converging flood channels. Urban planners knew this when they approved the facility's construction permit in 2018. Environmental impact assessments specifically flagged the location as high risk for flash flooding during extreme precipitation events. The facility operated anyway. Floodwaters surged in the area on Monday morning and caught everyone unprepared. The care center sat on low-lying ground near a river, a location that became a death trap when intense rainfall overwhelmed the waterway. The facility housed 69 elderly residents, including 55 who were disabled, making evacuation extraordinarily challenging, even under ideal circumstances. When flash floods struck, staff had minimal time to move residents to safety before the building became surrounded by rushing water. And sadly, 9 people remain missing, suggesting the final death toll could climb even higher. Ironically, Miyun district was considered Beijing's safest location for elderly care facilities because of its distance from urban flood zones. But that rural location meant slower emergency response times and fewer evacuation resources when disaster struck. More than 80,000 people were relocated across Beijing, but that number only represents people who were successfully evacuated before the flooding peaked. Hidden in Beijing's official disaster statistics is a more disturbing reality. Flooding damaged dozens of roads and cut power to at least 136 villages. When you map these power outages, they create a perfect circle around Beijing's most vulnerable communities, rural areas where elderly residents, farmers, and migrant workers had the fewest resources to escape. The flood didn't discriminate, but Beijing's emergency response did. Wealthy central districts received evacuation warnings 6 hours before dangerous flooding. Rural communities in Miyun, Yangqing, and Huairu got less than 2 hours' notice, if they got any warning at all. This wasn't an accident. Beijing's flood warning system prioritizes areas based on economic value and population density. Nursing homes in rural districts scored low on both metrics. Beijing spent $2.1 billion on flood defenses after the devastating 2023 floods that killed 33 people. The city installed advanced drainage systems, constructed emergency reservoirs, and built flood barriers designed to handle once-in-a-century storm events. But there's a problem with designing for century-level floods. climate change doesn't follow historical patterns. The Miyun Reservoir, Beijing's largest water source, reached capacity levels not recorded since 1963. The reservoir's overflow management system was designed based on flood data from 1950 to 2000. Engineers never factored in the possibility of multiple extreme precipitation events occurring within a single decade. Beijing's new flood barriers performed exactly as designed. They successfully protected the city center from a 100-year flood. Unfortunately, they faced a 200-year flood with 300-year precipitation intensity. While international media focused on the death toll,
at least 30 people have died in severe flooding on the outskirts of Beijing. The worst-hit areas have been in the mountains near the Chinese capital. Around 130 villages are without electricity.
the true human impact extends far beyond the 44 confirmed fatalities. Heavy rainstorms battered Miyun district from July 23 to 29, nearly a week of continuous extreme weather that created psychological trauma for thousands of survivors. In rural Beijing, entire farming communities lost not just their homes, but their livelihoods. Corn and soybean crops that represent a year's income were destroyed in a single night. Small-scale farmers who supply Beijing's food markets face financial ruin with no crop insurance coverage for unprecedented weather events. The 80,000 evacuated residents face a different kind of crisis. Temporary housing that was supposed to last a few days has now stretched into weeks. Emergency shelters are overcrowded. Sanitation systems are failing. And families have no clear timeline for returning home. Many of the worst affected areas remain inaccessible to repair crews. Roads washed out by the floods are the same roads needed to bring in equipment to fix the floods. It's a rebuilding paradox that could take months to resolve. This wasn't Beijing's first deadly flood, and it won't be the last. The city experienced major flooding in 2023, 33 deaths, 2021, huge damage, and 2012, 77 deaths. Every time, officials promised never again. Every time, they built more defenses designed for the last disaster instead of the next one. But did you know climate scientists have been warning Beijing officials for years?
Because this is exactly what we scientists have been predicting for years and even decades. But when you actually see it in real life with your own eyes, it's different than seeing it in a row of tiny numbers on your computer.
Extreme precipitation events in northern China are becoming more frequent and more intense. The gap between normal years and disaster years is shrinking. Beijing's location in a natural basin made it prosperous for centuries by concentrating water resources. But that same geography becomes deadly when too much water arrives too quickly. The mountains that once protected Beijing now trap extreme weather events directly over the capital. The nursing home tragedy in Miyun district represents something larger than poor emergency planning. It reveals a city that's still building for the climate of the past while living in the climate of the future. As Beijing begins its recovery from 44 deaths and widespread destruction, the hard questions remain unanswered. Why were the most vulnerable populations placed in the highest risk locations? How many more safe facilities are actually sitting in flood zones that haven't been tested yet? And most critically, when extreme weather becomes normal, how do you protect a city that was never designed for the climate it now faces? The residents of the Taishitun Town Elderly Care Center deserved better than becoming statistics in a disaster that everyone saw coming, but no one prevented. Beijing's flood management is systematically biased toward protecting economic assets over human lives. Until that changes, every heavy rainstorm becomes a potential death sentence for the city's most vulnerable residents. The 2025 Beijing floods ended on July 31st, but their impact continues rippling through China's capital region. Thousands remain displaced. Critical infrastructure lies damaged. And the psychological scars of watching your city transform into a deadly lake in a matter of hours will last for years. But the most frightening reality isn't what happened in Beijing last month. It's what happens when this becomes the new normal. Climate models predict that extreme precipitation events like Beijing's July floods will occur every 3 to 5 years, instead of every 30-50 years. The city's current flood defenses, even after billions in upgrades, simply cannot handle repeated disasters of this magnitude. The next Beijing flood isn't a question of if, it's a question of when and how many. And until Beijing prioritizes human vulnerability over economic calculations in its disaster planning, the answer to how many will continue to be measured in lives lost rather than lives saved. Thanks for watching Earth's Dark Secrets, where we expose the hidden realities behind our planet's most devastating disasters. If you found this investigation revealing, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us uncover the stories authorities don't want told. Hit the bell so you never miss our in-depth analysis of the disasters that reveal our planet's dark truths.